Test. Yep. All right. Just kind of fixing my cable situation now. I got different mic today than I usually use. And that's mostly just because I've got a bunch of stuff set up in the basement to make sure this is actually working. All right. And move you. Okay. Get that away from my face and maybe mute that. And then turn that one up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Boom. Sorry about the delay. 4 minutes in. Not too bad. As always, welcome to the stream. Today we're going to talk about the Firefight tournament that I did this past weekend. It was 6 players, and we had no repeats on armies, actually, so that was kind of cool. There was, I brought my Veerman, and my daughter actually came to the tournament. She played. She brought her Plague. We had an Enforcers player. We had a Marauders player. We had a Forge Fathers player, and we had an Asterians player. So we had a good mix. You know, obviously, a little bit of everything, so that was cool. Nobody got a mirror match. It was a really good time, and, you know, the community is growing. It is growing a little faster than I expected, given the history I have trying to grow non-Warhammer, non-40K communities. So I was really excited to see that this is already 6, 7, 8. Like, we actually had 7, but 1 dropped. He got pulled into something else instead of being able to make the tournament. So, again, being able to have 7 players at a tournament for the first tournament I've ever run for this game is pretty impressive, considering every other non-GW game I've ever run an event for has usually hit like 4 or 5. You know, if I throw a 40K tournament, I can usually get 20 to 30. If I do an AOS, it's usually like 14 to 20. And then, you know, obviously getting into non-GW games, your player base kind of drops off because that's what everybody knows. That doesn't mean it's the best. It doesn't mean it's the worst. It doesn't mean anything other than that's just what is, especially in America. I don't know. I can't speak for Europe, but especially in America, you know, like the U.S., that's what people know. They know 40K. It's the most popular, most well-known game. So before we do kind of dig into everything, I do want to let everybody know, if you're a member of the Firefight Fanatics Facebook. Nope. Never mind. Ignore that. My brain was getting ready to go off on a tangent, and then I realized that that's not even what I was about to say wasn't even true. Oh well. So let's dig in, right? Let's get started. Let's get it started in here. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the list first. After we go through the list, we're going to go round by round, each opponent. I'll do my best to kind of try to figure out what it is they brought. I can look their lists up. I don't want to dig too much into their lists because obviously their list didn't change too much for how I played. It just changed the way I approached what they brought, right? So, and really, I feel like the way I played against them would play well against any of those armies, regardless of how they were brought, if that makes sense. So the first things first, I'm the illest, right? So we've got it says potential rat list, and the reason I played this one, I did talk about a different list before the tournament, but I ended up changing to this one because I was able to get my hands on a rat fiend, and that was like what was hinging on whether or not I brought this list, is whether or not I had a rat fiend I could put on the table, because I thought those things just looked nutty, and they looked like a lot of fun, and I was not disappointed. So we've got the Progenitor. I've got 2 of these, actually. They're inspiring, small unit 3, tactician, blah, 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 blah. You know, we don't need to go through everything line by line like we do for our unit breakdowns. But I brought it because it has haze grenades. And you pick any one friendly unit within 9 inches, and that unit gains the stealthy keyword and cover until the start of its next activation. You know, so one of the things that I used that for was my Tunneler or my Rat Fiend. You know, I made sure that either I was going to activate my Rat Fiend first or activate my Rat Fiend last, or my Tunneler first or my Tunneler last, and then, made sure to throw the haze grenades on it as soon as I could. And that's why I had 2 progenitors, because the command orders, and I actually had to double check this at the event, because we were like, I don't know if this is true. So we had to double check it at the event. But the command orders don't actually say that you are limited. So command models, blah, 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 blah. They require command points. A single command order may be used during a command unit's activation if it is not pinned. It can be used before or after, but not during an action, which is important. So you could take a movement action and then use haze grenades and then take a shoot action, for example, however you want to do it, right? Or you could sprint, get it where you need it, and then use it. But if you look, it doesn't have the same limit that the faction orders do, right? Faction orders, blah, 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 blah. Each faction order may be only used once per round. So a lot of times what ended up happening was I had both those progenitors so we could give cover and stealthy to 2 different units. Sometimes it'd be the Rat Fiend and the Tunneler. Sometimes it'd be Nightmares and the Tunneler, whatever. But it was one of those, having both of those on the table so that I could just kind of slap them around a little bit was worth. I didn't give them the ray gun. I gave them the upgraded grenade launcher. They get chemical shells, which is blast D4 and then toxic. And all in all, like, it was actually, like, I didn't shoot it very often, but I will say that when I shoot it, or shot it, when I shot it, I was not disappointed with how it performed. I mean, sure, it's hitting on 5, so it's whatever, but when it hit, like, I think one game I shot, and I'll dig into this a little bit more later, but I think it was the Asterians game. I shot him, and I hit him, even with stealthy and cover, it was like, oh, okay, I got like a 7, and then blasted into 4 hits, did 3 damage, did 2 more toxic, and he just picked up the whole unit. And that's where I think this grenade launcher is cool, is that you can't rely on it to be consistent. But so far in my experience with Veerman, nothing about them is very reliable. But what you can do is you can just understand that sometimes those grenades are going to go off, something's going to pop off, and it's going to do really well. But the haze grenades, like I said, awesome command ability. It took me a little bit of quite a few games to kind of figure out how to hand that out. But I like it. I like it a lot. So we had 2 of those. One of them had a homie, and that was just a points thing. I just had points, so I was just like, all right, give him a homie. And then we brought a Master Creeper, and the reason we brought the Master Creeper really was, A, it's cheap. I didn't necessarily need this. I don't know that I even used it the whole game, or the whole tournament. Maybe once when I charged with some, but it was one of those, like, I wanted it just in case, and I wanted to give it a try. His evade came in clutch a game, so there was a couple times where, like, evade was good, stuff like that. But all in all, I'm not necessarily sold on the Creeper. He probably needs some friends in order to feel pretty good, because without friends, he just doesn't do anything. Like, his Master Creeper pack's only 2 attacks. And most of the time, I'm going to hit on 4s or 5s, because if I charge. So all in all, it's just him by himself. Probably wouldn't bring him again, but again, it was mostly just the points and then models. Like, what models do I have? I could have probably figured something out, but he was fine. I didn't hate him. Now, I had 2 units of crawlers. They were both 10 model squads, and, crawlers, it's one of those, and again, I am going to dive deep into this army the way I dove deep into enforcers, so we're going to dig into crawlers. But the main thing with this was I brought them because A, they're cheap bodies, B, they're overwhelmed 10. I have 10 bodies in it, so, for missions like control, I can just start off having unit strength 3 unless you have, like, indirect, and you can start planking bodies. And that's really why. I gave the sergeant the heavy ray gun, and then I gave them, I don't think they even have a choice, they just got the ray gun. And really what it boiled down to was their shooting sucks. Like these things hit on sixes, they're going to hit on sevens if you have cover. So I really just got to the point where I was like, oh, there's really no reason to not just blaze away with these things almost every time you shoot, because most of the time you're going to hit on sevens at best, unless your opponent doesn't really know how to use cover or you're able to like really get them in a good spot. So that was one of those that was kind of interesting, that realization. And obviously blazing away uh, didn't do anything against the Asterians as far as pin tokens go, but if I'm already -2 to hit, now I can get, what, 10, 11 dice? I can get 11 dice hitting on sevens, or I can effectively double that and hit on eights. So I can get twice as many dice, but reduce my efficiency by 12%. And it was just like, yeah, whatever, man. We'll just blaze away. And that's what I did most of the time. Now, I also had 2 units of Stalkers, but these were a little bit beefier because I wanted this. The Stalkers, I think, are awesome. I think this is an excellent troop unit. You know, the Sergeant has the Chem Thrower, which I think I don't know that I ever used it. Maybe once or twice. But it's got the Chem Thrower. They are frenzied too. And that's what I love about these things. They get 2 attacks each. You know, the base boys get 2 attacks each. And so you're throwing almost 25, 30 dice out of this unit. And then Frenzy 2, you can Teeth and Claws them if you want to, so that Frenzy will stack up, and it gives them Vicious. And it just makes them a nightmare, you know, even into some of the heavier armored stuff, because you're just throwing so many dice. And that's where I was like, man, these things, I love them. You know, I love Stalkers. I think probably, honestly, one of the best units in the army, just because of how cheap they are. Like their points efficiency, their unit strength, like everything about them, good. They're just good. You know, so we had 2 units of those. Both of them were 13 model squads. I did take a unit of Maligny, and I gave them all heavy ray guns. And man, the only game they didn't really do much. Let me rephrase. Technically, there's 2 games they didn't do much in. They didn't do much against the Forge Fathers, but that's more because of how I played them. But they also didn't do much against the Asterians. You know, but again, that was also because it was just like, I've got cover and I'm stealthy, and it was just like, oh, I'm just hitting on sevens. Well, I'll just blaze away then, and we'll just like go from 10 to 15 dice and just hope we roll 8s, you know. And that's kind of where I went with it. And they were effective. Like the AP1 was good. Don't get me wrong. And they are troops. And I think that was one of those times where I was able to use that creeper order so I could make them AP2. And that helped a lot. I do want to kind of look at them with I think they have a Chem Thrower variant. And really that's just because I want to look at potentially like supercharging them. 2 units of 3 Nightmares. I love these things. I don't know if they're good or not, but I love them. 2 heavy drills, and then 1 with just twin combat drills. And, I mean, you hit somebody once with them, and they will kind of, like if they've not seen what they do, Nightmares get in there one time, and a lot of times people are just like, hold up, what was that? Why did they do that? How was that again? You know, so even the heavier armored Forge Fathers, like they had to respect the Nightmares, because I could get them into a squad of your troops, and there's a good chance I'm just blending your troops, and if I don't, I'm still probably winning that combat, unless you have like just some nutty unit that throws out 1,000,000 attacks. You know, so I think the Nightmares, awesome, definitely worth their points. I prefer them in 4 model squads, but again, points was the big issue here. A unit of 3 tunnel runners, man, I don't know if they're good or not. I love them. This is one of those where I just love the model, so I'm bringing it. And, you know, every game I started with them in reserves, and that was mostly because I just wanted to test it out. And all in all, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. They are armor 7 with 3 hit points, so they're a little tankier than a lot of the other stuff that I have, you know. But being vehicle, they can't control objectives. Evade is handy. but you've really got to kind of like use it, and that's the main thing. The Twin Chem Spitter is good. It's, AP2 with Blaze Away and 3 dice, so you can get 4 dice out of each one, and then Vicious and Melee at AP1. So like they have good weapons, but shooting and assaulting on 5s gets a little rough, so it's just like, come on, man. But at the end of the day, I don't think I have any complaints about them. I just don't think they really stood out either. Like if I had to take either Nightmares or a Tunnel Runner unit, I'd probably take the Nightmares just because the damage output, and they're not beast or vehicle, so they can control objectives, and they assault on 4s. Like, sure, they shoot on 6s, but that's not what I'm using them for. The Tunnel Runners were a lot more versatile, and there were certain matchups where they felt better. Like, they felt better into the Asterians. They didn't feel very good into the Forge Fathers. And the Marauders, that was kind of its own thing. Like, nothing felt bad. But that was just one of those where, unfortunately, for the Marauders player, he just kind of hit a buzzsaw, and that is what it is, And then, my big, fat, beautiful mutant rat bastard. I love this thing. I cannot stress how much I love this thing. It hits on 3s in assault. It's beast, bulky, regeneration, terrifying, unflinching, vicious in assault, countercharge. It throws 8 dice at AP3 with anti-tank, 5 hit points, armor 7 up, and then, it charges 15 inches. Like, I can't say enough about this thing. It is so awesome. I loved it. And we're going to get into how I used it when we talk about round 1. Now, I did take a Tunneler, and it took up a lot of points at 145. And a lot of that was because I gave it the shield, right? Defensive shielding. And every game, my Maligni were in it. Now, it does have a shield generator, and it does have special defensive shielding. Let's talk about defensive shielding, because this was one of those rules I had to read it about 6 times before I was like, wait a minute, So if you haven't looked at it, defensive shielding, friendly units within 6 inches may choose to place any hits against them during a shoot, blaze away, or steady aim action against the shield tunneler. Only hits up to the remaining number of shields on the shield tunneler may be allocated in this way. Each hit allocated removes 1 shield from the tunneler. Okay, so what this means is that this honky has a 6-inch aura of, if I want to, I can just say no to some of your shooting. So a good example is like the Forge Fathers player was like, oh, I've got an anti-tank gun. And then he shot it at my Rat Fiend once. And I was just like, cool. And I told him, like, it wasn't a gotcha. I was just like, hey, I can use the shields on this thing for anything around it. And he was just like, yeah, okay. But that object permanence hits, and you just start playing and shit falls out of your ears. So he shoots at it. And I'm just like, I'm going to take that big anti-tank weapon. And I'm just going to throw it away and dial my shield down 1. So it's... I don't know that I would ever play a tunneler without the shield generator at this point. I may play it without the super heavy ray gun just because, again, it's 3 shots that hit on 5s. But the nice thing about the super heavy ray gun is that even though it hits on 5s, the profile itself, while it's not like pants shittingly terrifying, it's scary enough that your opponent still has to respect it. Like, they still have to be like, oh, that's AP3, and it does D2 damage with 3 shots. If you get a couple of those through, I could just, like, pick up a whole tank, right? And that's it. So I really just some trash and some elite stuff to support it, which to me is just how this army seems to work. So, now that we've talked about that, let's talk about... I don't need you open anymore. That was the rules. Let's talk about the missions. First mission was Controlled Advance. After the player with the initiative has chosen their deployment zone, but before either player deploys any model, so after you roll, but before you deploy, you place 8 objective markers on the table, starting with the player that has initiative. So you both get 4 objective markers. players place 2 objective markers wholly within 6 inches of the center line, which is this dotted line across the middle of the map. So each player places 2 objectives wholly within 6 of this line. They could be on either side of the line. They just have to be wholly within 6 inches away from other objectives, 6 inches away from table edge. So what it does is it usually, it just keeps all the action in the middle of the board. And it helps prevent turtling, which I appreciate. At the end of At the end of each round, you score victory points. And basically, and you put 2 in your deployment zone. So you'll put 2 in no man's land, 2 in deployment zone, both players, for a total of 4 each or 8. You score 1 point if you control one of the objectives in your deployment zone. Let me rephrase. If you control one objective in your deployment zone, each no man's land objective, and it's not even no man's land, each objective you control that's not in your deployment zone is worth 1 victory point. So let's take a look at this. We're going to break this down. I got my pen. And, if you're new to the channel, get used to this. I do it a lot. Boop. Let's do yellow should show up. Yeah. Okay, so we might have one here, 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 and here. So these are the 4 objectives that each player places wholly within 6 of the table edge. And then you might have one here and here. And then the other player might put it here and here. So again, 6 inches away from table edge in your deployment zone. Now, let's grab a different color. Let's grab blue. If I control one objective in my deployment zone, then each one of these is worth 1 point. I don't get any points for the one in my deployment zone. And I can even score for holding this one because it's not in my deployment zone. So if you hold 1 in your deployment zone, every objective that's not in your deployment zone on the table is worth 1 point. If you hold both of the objectives in your deployment zone, then every single one of these is worth 2 points. And you get 2 bonus victory points for holding both the objectives in your deployment zone. What this means is that if you control these 2 objectives, you get 2 victory points. If you also control this one, you get 2 for this one, and then 2 bonus for having these 2. Make sense? Perfect. So that was our first mission. I played against Marauders round 1. Yep. Let's see. Boop. I've got a big bad board. All right, let's blow this up. Now, I apologize for the stupid angle. This was kind of hastily done because I was like, oh shit, I need pictures. Now, as you can see, let's get rid of all these X's. And we'd already started. Let's see if we can mark where these are. Let's use black. So we got 1 here. I've got 1 way down here. There's 1 here. And then all of the no man's land ones are right in this area here. There's 1 here. Let's see. Let's go with pink. There's 1 here. There's 1 here. And there's 1 here. And it's basically like this little triangle in which they could all fit. And so all the action was going to be right here. We both knew it as we were placing objectives. I was just cheeky and put a couple way out here because I thought, man, if I could just hold those the whole game, it's going to be really funny. And I ended up doing it. I held them both the whole game because all the action was right here. So I was just getting free points for having cheap units sit here on objectives. As you can see, I put the tunneler on the board. I did it every game. All 3 games, it started on the table. And all 3 games, it started off like this. And what I mean by that is it's sideways to block as much line of sight as it can. And this handsome fella started, because I think we were already into turn 2. Yeah, we had to have been. This handsome fella started right here. and then I just kind of moved him out. So I used the tunneler to block line of sight from the Rat Fiend in the event that he had some long range shooting, so that I didn't have to worry about the Rat Fiend getting smoked. And he'd have to dump a ton of dice into the tunneler at armor 8 with heavy armor and 6 shields in order to get rid of it. So that was a big part of why I did that. And then, let's see, let's erase. You know, and so at that point, it just came down to, can you kill the things you need to kill? And part of it was just, I've played more reps, you know, and he was kind of testing out some weird stuff. He had a lot of stunt bots, and I think they're called grunt bots. I don't know. The 40k terms for them would be Def Dreads and Killicans, but I don't remember what the actual terms in Firefight are. But they're like robots, you know. You can see here. And you know, he just couldn't do anything. And really what it boils down to is I just think he didn't have enough shooting. Like, he's got some Rainmakers back here, but I effectively made them useless. These guys came out of reserves after they had shot, and I was double activating as fast as I could to make sure I got priority, because as soon as I got priority, I just bolted right into there. I did not care. I've played against Rainmakers enough to know that if I don't do something about them, they will just pick up whole units. Like, they will just make me pick up whatever they look at. So I was just spamming through command points just to double activate so that I could charge him right here. I won the assault. He got marked activated, fell back, and, you know, I picked up my tunnelers pretty quickly after that. I think I lost one that turn, and then, you know, the other two I think just died, or maybe one died and they failed nerve, whatever. Doesn't matter. Excuse me. But I lost them quickly after doing that, but just shutting down, because I killed, I think, one. I might have killed two, but I know I killed one Rainmaker, and just killing that one Rainmaker and shutting them off for a turn, and that was effectively all of his shooting. So once that happened, I was able to just push. You know, this guy, because I had counter charge here and controlled fire here, homie charged me, and I think I killed him on the charge with controlled fire, if I remember right. Or maybe he even won the assault. I'm trying to remember now. I don't remember exactly what happened, but he charged in, and either he won the assault, I won the assault. He didn't die. Now that I'm thinking about it, he didn't die, but I don't remember who won the assault. But then my rat just came in, cleaned him up. Boom, you're dead. Don't care. Like I said, this Rat Fiend, what that is that's a Hell Pit Abomination on an 80mm base, scaled down a little bit, and I love it. I love the Rat Fiend. I love the Hell Pit Abomination model. It was like a match made in heaven. I absolutely think this guy he's like an auto take. He is absurd in what he does. So the final score, let me see if I can pull that up. It was rough. Like I said, it was pretty rough. And it was really just, like I said, table time difference. I have a lot more table time with the game. I've been playing the ever-living shit out of this game. Let me see. Firefight. Round one. It was 37-18, and I had killed 900 points of his army to 300 of mine that died. Like I said, it was just a rough game, and a lot of it was, A, like I said, mostly just table time, but B, also, like, he just didn't have enough shooting, and I think he's still trying to figure out the army. And honestly, I think, looking at the Marauders, there's almost no reason not to take, like, a Wolverine. You know, something big and meaty and tanky with some anti-tank guns that you can set on the table. You know, to me, that Wolverine is worth. Maybe not, but I look at it and I think, man, that thing looks spicy. But that was my round one. It was a lot of fun. And then round two and round three, I ended up at the same table. Yeah. And that is what it is. Oh well, I don't mind. We had to readjust some terrain, but that was just because of the round 3. Round 2 was control. And control is you divide the table up into chunks, right? You've got thirds and then in half. And then you score 1 point for every chunk you control on your half of the table. You score 2 chunks for this one, 2, and then 3. So if I am the red player here, these are all worth 1. And then if I have more unit strength in this chunk than my opponent, then I get 2 points. If I have more unit strength in the middle than my opponent, I get 3. That was a game. Hey, what's up, buddy? That was a game against the Styrians. That's an interesting army. And thankfully, I had enough junk volume to just kind of like overwhelm the shields. And let's see. Boop. Here was our table. And this one was pretty interesting. Just because, like I said, like I had a lot of junk volume. So I could just kind of deal with, oh, I've got all these shields. Well, cool. I'm just going to. And again, a lot of blaze away this game because there was so much like -1 or -2 to hit. Because there was like, oh, well, this guy has stealthy and then this guy has cover or whatever. You know, or this has cover. And with the, specifically with the crawlers, the troops that hit on 6s for shooting, it was just like, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to, you know, blaze away. And you know, I'm not gonna walk you through things that happened in this game because this one was pretty rough. Also, the final score was 27-11 was our final, and it was just, you know, like it was just brutal. And his list was good. It was interesting. He had, again, I don't know the names of everything. I think it was like the assassin tank, which to me is just a fire prism. And again, I'm not trying to just constantly compare the game to 40K. It's just coming from 40K. This is how I kind of know things and remember them. That being said, again, the Rat Fiend did so much heavy lifting. Like, he had a tank with shields that was like somewhere in here. I don't even remember. And I think it had 2 shields left, and the Rat Fiend just like 100% hit and damaged him and just vaporized the tank. The Maligni were real clutch that game because it was just like, all right, well, they get 10 dice and they hit on 5s. And if you're going to push them to 7s with like stealthy and all this other stuff, I'm just going to blaze away and we're just going to throw 15 dice and we're just going to try that. You know, so it's one of those, like I said, I had the junk volume to kind of deal with them with the crawlers, the Maligni. The tunnel runners were amazing this game. You know, again, just because 3 dice for shooting is 9 out of 3 models. And then in melee, it's 4 dice. So it was a lot of just like, all right, I have the dice to deal with you. I don't need to kill the unit. I just need to win this assault. I just need to start, like, if I can chip bodies away. Because he had a lot of... God dang it, what's the unit? They have like a fission gun for their one of the models can take like a fission gun, and then they just have like regular rifles. It's 3 model squads. He had a lot of 3 model units. You know, it was a lot of just like, I have like 15 units. They're all min squads. But for me, because I had that volume, I was able to just be like, oh, you could pick that one up. You could pick that one up. You could pick that one up. And I don't think what he was doing was wrong. Honestly, like, I think he just kind of got outplayed. And, you know, because I think he won his first game against the Forge Fathers, lost his second game against me, and then I believe he played Marauders the final round and won that game. So I think he came in 2nd or 3rd place. I'd have to look. You know, so he did well. He did very well. And then round 3, we were on the same table, but this feature right here had to kind of get shifted over because of the mission. And I didn't take a picture of it because at this point I think everyone was getting a little tired. But this one was manpower. All right, each deployment zone, blah, 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 blah. After the player with initiative, yeah. So you put an objective marker in the dead center of the table, as you can see. And then, starting with the player that has the initiative, you alternate placing 2 objective markers per player, wholly within 6, and in their opponent's half of the table. All objective markers must be at least 6 inches apart from each other and 6 inches away from the table edge. So again, all that really means, let me scroll down a little bit more, is you've got this one here. Oh, why is that so thick? God dang. What the heck happened? All right, that's good. So you got that one here. Then each player takes turn placing 2. So like one was here, one was here. Actually, the way it like panned out, I think it was almost like this, like 3 of them. And then once again, like a goose, I was just like, I'm gonna throw one way over here, because I was playing Forge Fathers, and my thinking was, I have the bodies, I have the units that I can just sprint up there. And if I can sit on that objective the whole game, he's not going to be able to spread out. He's not going to be able to cover the table. He's not going to be able to do all the things he needs to do. And really, this was a game where I ramped points early, and then just slowly was like I was just getting slowly bled to death over time. My Rat Fiend, he had like a big meaty tank. I had to charge it, Rat Fiend into it. Rat Fiend killed it, but I already knew that it was a trade because it pulled the Rat Fiend out of range of the shields, and I knew he was just going to dump into it, and it's one of those, like, I knew going into it that's how that was going to go, but I needed that tank to go away because that was the only real threat he had to my tunneler, because he had the big 8-shot cannon, and then he had the big anti-tank cannon because he had 2 tanks. And it's one of those where the 8-shot cannon, sure, it's gonna probably chew through my shields, but the odds of it actually doing damage aren't very good. So what he had wanted to do was, like, oh, I'm gonna tag it with this, and then once the shields are gone, I'm gonna tag it with that. But I just was like, all right, we got to get rid of one of these 2 tanks. So I ended up getting rid of the heavy tank, and a lot of that just boils down to it had a shorter range, so it was closer. So at the end of the day, the game played the way I kind of figured it would. Dwarves aren't a very fun army in my experience to play against in any game. Like, this is not restricted to this game, right? Because like they're just so efficient. They're very uninteractive. It's a lot of like, all of my stuff is just super efficient, and you basically are relegated to, well, I'm going to sit on objectives and just try to outscore you while you kill everything. And it's one of those where that's kind of how they play in almost every game I've ever played that's on a tabletop. And I've yet to play against a dwarf army or team or have an experience against dwarves in a tabletop game in which I was like, man, that was fun. And a lot of that started with Blood Bowl. And I'm not trying to like go on a tirade and bitch about dwarves or anything. It's just one of those, like, I just wish gaming companies would figure out that they don't have to make dwarves the way that they all seem to make dwarves. Like, oh, let's give them all the best possible armor, and let's give them all like super weapons, and let's make them like hyper elite and all this other stuff. And then it's just like, you just like, oh, again, like even in 40K when the Votann first came out, it was a lot of, well, I can't hurt you, and you're just making me pick up whole units, so I'm just going to go stand on objectives and pass turn. And that's a big part of how this game went, was just like, oh, well, you have this objective, well, I'm just going to sprint a unit on here and prevent your scoring while I hold this one over here, and you can't do anything about that one. So it's just like, well, I'll just sprint over here, shut off your scoring, sprint here, shut off your scoring, sprint here, shut off your scoring, and then, pass turn. And like I said, it's just one of those, like, I get it. It's very flavorful, but it's one of those as a player, I wish somebody would figure out how to make them a more interactive army is all. Crybaby session over about that. But it was a fun game. My opponent was fun to play with. I know him. He's a good dude. And, it's one of those, like I said, it's just like, man, it feels bad to just be picking up everything. And to put it into perspective, round 3, I beat him 24-18, but he scored most of his points like the last 2 turns. He killed almost 800 points of my army, and I killed like 400 points of his. And it's not that I didn't try. I just couldn't. And, what they almost remind me of is, again, if you're a 40K player, they almost remind me of Knights. And what I mean by that is they're so elite and they're so durable and they're so efficient that, and Knights, there's going to be people out there who are just like, oh, that's not Knights, and that's fine. Because 40K changes and the way the game's played changes quite a bit sometimes. But generally speaking with Knights, depending on what army you bring too, you don't really fight against them. You just kind of score, especially like when 10th first launched. And then the other part of that is that either you have the tools to deal with them or you don't. Like, it's not I can make this generalist list that'll do anything to anybody. It's well, I need to make sure I have this specific stuff just in case I hit Knights. And that's kind of how I see Dwarves, is like they're that one army where it's like, well, you need to make sure you have a couple different options for dealing with heavy armor just in case you run into Dwarves at a tournament. Like, that's how I see them. And again, I don't mean to come off being negative. And it's like I don't like Dwarves, but it's also partially in jest. Like, I would never put you down for being a Dwarf player and being like, oh God, you're a piece of shit. It's more just like, as a person who wants to play a game, I just feel like when I play against Dwarves, only one of us is playing a game. Like, I'm playing my game and you're playing your game, but we're not playing it together. So again, I don't mean to rag on anybody. It's just one of those, like, personal frustrations, because this is how they interact in almost every tabletop game. So, that was a great mission, though. And like I said, it went pretty well. It went as I hoped it would. I kind of hoped that if I just kind of rushed the objectives with one unit at a time, sent them in waves, and really, because I think because of like reserves and the transports and stuff like that, and he was doing a lot of double activating, there was a lot of times where he ended up beating me, but that was okay because that allowed me to finish out my turn. And I think maybe he'd have been better off just like forcing me to have to activate certain things a little faster. But I had so many units. I think I had 13 total units. I could just be like, all right, I'm going to activate that unit. He's just going to sit here and go into Overwatch. Go ahead. With my Marauder list. Yep, and that's actually, and for anybody that's watching in the chat there on YouTube, that's Garrett. That was my round 1 opponent. That is one thing I did address, was that I thought you just didn't have enough shooting, so it was like, once, like in our game, once I was able to hit those Rainmakers, it just took so much pressure off of me, even just having one other unit that you could shoot with would have been big. You could bring all that melee, but if you'd have had 2 shooting units, then it's not like, oh, as soon as I hit those Rainmakers, that pressure's off of me and I can just kind of hit the gas. But that was actually one of the first things I brought up about our matchup, Garrett. But yeah, so I liked manpower. I like so far the mission structure of this game, because the missions really seem to help balance out the armies. I don't know that I would ever play Scourge in an actual tournament, just because that could get brutal. At the end of each round, each player scores 3 victory points if they have destroyed one or more enemy units that round. You know, it's one of those, like, to me, that creates a game where, depending on matchup, like that's not fun for anybody, right? Like, to me, Scourge is like you drink some beers with your buddies, and that's a game you play. But for a tournament, I almost think you just don't do that. And the reason is because there's just going to be armies in general where you're just like, oh, well, I'm just going to spend the whole game hiding and running, and you're going to spend the whole game getting pissed off because you can't catch me, and I'm going to spend the whole game getting pissed off because I can't interact with you, and this is just not going to be a fun interaction. So Scourge is like the only mission from a tournament perspective where I may just leave that one out. But so far, I have yet to play a mission where I'm like, man, this sucks. Like, so far, they're all good. I'd like to look at... I want to look at maybe coming up with some different deployment zones for some missions. You know, kind of take a page out of, like, Fantasy or Warhammer, where we're not just, like, hamburger, right? Or hot dog, whatever the kids call it these days. But, you know, something maybe like search and destroy. Let's, you know, like a search and destroy mission where it's more like this. Yeah, that's what I thought. Oops. And then, honestly, at that point, you can have the middle of the board objective, right? And then instead of having the line, like, you can draw your line here, and you can just place objectives wholly within 6 of that line. And that's doable. Like, that's not that hard to accomplish. You just lay a tape measure across the whole thing if you need to. Obviously, that might not be ideal depending on how terrain's set up, but something like that would work. And I might have to play test that and give it a whirl, you know. But overall, like I said, that's my only real gripe about the mission structures. That almost every mission is that deployment zone right there, Dawn of War. But all right, let's close you out. Let's see. We talked about that. We talked about that. We talked about that. But yeah, that was it. I just want to make sure we covered everything. I'll have to rewind. I just couldn't interact. Yeah, no, our game was pretty rough, you know, and I did touch on the fact that part of it was also just the difference in table time. You know, I just have way more table time than probably anybody there at this point, because, like, I'm playing with my kid in the basement. I'm like harassing people to come play. Like, it's nonstop for me, you know. So it's one of those, like, part of it's table time, part of it was just, like I said, you know, you needed something else to shoot, whether it was a Wolverine or another unit of Rainmakers, anything like that, wouldn't have mattered, just something else. And I think a few trash, like cheap trash units for just like camping back objectives, like a couple 5-mans of your commandos or something to just kind of sit on objectives in the back instead of, like, you know, and I think commandos are, like, kind of good, you know, but we've talked about it. I also talked about how friggin' awesome the Rat Fiend is. He's glorious. I also realized that I'm pretty sure Alex was doubling up on orders, and I'm not upset about it. Actually, I know he did, but I didn't even think about it in the moment. Again, coming from a 40k background, it's normal for you to spend like 6 command points and just like strap bomb, which is one of the things that I really appreciate about this game. But when it happens to me in this game, because of 40k, I don't always remember that you can't do that in this game, or I would have been like, hey dog, you can't do that. I don't think it changed literally anything. I think he still kills as much as he kills, and I think I still get the, like, obviously it would have only benefited me, but it's one of those, like, gotta remember that, gotta remember that, gotta remember that. That's going to do it. We're going to wrap this up. I think I'm going to try to run a firefight tournament. I've got the Highlander coming up in January, and I'll probably do a firefight again in February. And then I've got to get with the venue, but we're talking about doing a 40K GT in what, June, July, June, May, June timeframe, I think it is. I have to find out. So I've got a lot of events on deck. We're looking at maybe doing a Mordheim campaign, and I'm gonna start recording more like battle reports, like honest to God battle reports, not like just streaming, but actual edit them and stuff like that. And so a lot of good stuff coming up. I graduate hopefully in December. I'm working that out with the school right now because I had to file a complaint against one of my professors, but I'm not going to dig into that right now. But ultimately, graduate in December, should have more free time after that, and hopefully can start cranking out more videos for everybody. So, like, subscribe, appreciate it. MilitaryGamingCommand.org, check it out if you haven't. Nonprofit that does a lot of work with disabled veterans and wounded soldiers and veterans, not just soldiers. For those that don't know, soldiers specifically refer to the Army. So, thanks for watching. Hope you all have a great day. We'll see you next time.